folks, it's Joe, and today I want to tell you some really great things about the genus Oncidium. For people who've been growing Phalaenopsis or any other thing from the grocery store, this is a logical next step in orchids. It's a really great family of plants. It's kind of big, and it has a lot of things in it. There's a little bit of a trouble with the Oncidium labeling. In taxonomy, there's some controversy because a lot of species that are not Oncidium have been lumped together with Oncidium, and it's affecting the name of a lot of hybrid genera. Getting a little confusing, but Oncidium is a large family of plant, and it includes a lot of really great orchids, including Brassias, Oncidiums, Odontoglossums, some Metastalics. It includes Miltoniopsis. I mean, there's several different genera, and they're all really wonderful. A lot of them smell great, too. So one of the things that makes Oncidium really easy to grow is that they're very communicative plants. They make some really bright and beautiful colors, but they oftentimes will have the same type of growth pattern. Big grassy leaves and a pseudobulb at the bottom. If you have one that's like this one here, and the pseudobulbs are starting to wrinkle, this is an indication that you're not watering your Oncidium enough. You want to water your Oncidium in a typical house once or twice a week. Maybe once a week in winter and twice a week in summer if you're in the Pacific Northwest. If you live in an area where the temperature is more moderate, probably twice a week is good for you. But you do want to try to have a thick, full pseudobulb. And when the leaves get yellow, you can just pull them off with a gentle touch. Typically, Oncidium will grow a new pseudobulb from an old pseudobulb, and the new one is where the flower comes from. So what you're trying to produce is a couple of new growths, and that will make it bloom once or twice a year. Oncidiums grow really well in a tight pot, and once in a while what that means is you need to repot them. If you have an Oncidium, when it's time to repot the Oncidium, take it out of the pot, take all of the old material off the plant, and get the roots nice and loose. You're going to want to get rid of all of these things. Now you can choose what you pot it in. This has been potted in moss, which is really good for people who don't water it very often. If you just water once a week, pot in a moisture retentive medium, something like moss, right? When you get it down to the bare root state, you can also divide an Oncidium. Sometimes you get it down to here, and you can split them in two. You just pull the plant apart, and you want to try to preserve as much of the roots as possible. I'm doing it a little quickly and violently for the video, but basically try to keep the roots on there as much as you can. Once you get all of the roots down to their bare root state, and you've got a plant similar to this in a pot, you get rid of all of that. Then you'll want to repot it in a fresh pot. Sometimes they'll divide themselves. As long as you have a pseudobulb, some roots, and a leaf, you can make that into a whole new plant. We're going to take this out of moss and repot it into a standard orchid mix. For us, that means it's bark, perlite, and charcoal. We've added a little bit of rice husk to this just for some extra moisture retention. Put some of the medium into the pot. Tuck the plant in there with all of the roots. You want to try to make sure your newest growth is at the middle of the pot, so when the thing starts to grow again, it's got room to grow. And then put all the material in there, and where most people go wrong is they don't put it in there tight enough. You really want to try to crunch it in there. It should be crunching. You want to hear a crunching sound? The roots are very strong. My new growth is right here. You see the little baby leaf coming out? That's the part we want in the middle of the pot. It needs the most amount of room to grow. Once you have it in the pot, before you water it, do the rabbit ear test. Can you pick it up and the plant doesn't fall out of the pot? It means you have the material in there really nice and tight, with the new growth right here in the middle of the pot ready to go. After this, it's time to go water it and put it back on the bench. Your Oncidium stem gets old. It'll start to turn brown and dry out. It's not like some of the other orchids where you can trim them and the stem will continue to grow. When this happens, it's time to simply trim it off. You can use a sterile cutting tool and you can cut it, or sometimes you can just, with a gentle twist, it'll come out. Then a new growth will start to form at the bottom of the leaf, and when that new growth comes out, that's the part that's going to flower next. An Oncidium will produce a new growth with a new leaf, and it will flower from the new pseudobulb. And that cycle usually takes about a year. As a plant gets bigger, it might happen more than once a year, so you could get multiple bloomings in 1 year. A lot of people ask when it's time to fertilize, or how much should I fertilize my Oncidium? Oncidiums can take quite a bit of fertilizer for orchids, so what I would recommend is not to fertilize too often or too strongly, and make sure that when you fertilize that you are alternating with the clean water, or rinse it out with water after you fertilize to avoid salt buildups in the pot. With an Oncidium, the most important time to fertilize is when you start to see new growth coming out, because that's when the roots are forming the most. If you see new growth and you want to fertilize, give it a little bit, but don't overdo it.